Under Standing Order 36, we're going to take leaders' questions, and I first call on Deputy Matt Carthy.
Israel continues to act with impunity in its genocidal war on the people of Gaza. Over 30,000 Palestinians have now been killed. Millions of Palestinian refugees in Rafah now face the same nightmare as those massacred in Gaza City and Khan Yunis before the eyes of the world. Over 500,000 people face famine, according to the United Nations. The decline in the population's nutrition status is at a globally unprecedented rate. Children in Gaza are being starved at the fastest rate that the world has ever recorded, with 1 in 6 children under 2 years in northern Gaza now acutely malnourished. What Israel is doing on a daily basis is barbaric. The latest cold-blooded massacre of civilians in Nablus Square who were gathering flour from aid trucks has seen dozens of civilians killed and hundreds more wounded. Taoiseach, the state that is responsible for that and countless other massacres enjoys the most preferential diplomatic, economic and trading relationship with the EU of virtually any non-European country. These arrangements are worth billions of euro each year to an Israeli regime that is literally starving children to death and attacking civilians in the most relentless, brutal manner. You previously failed to support motions calling on Ireland to intervene in the case against Israel at the International Court of Justice brought by South Africa. Can I ask you, do you accept that what is happening in Gaza is genocide? Because the evidence is crystal clear. The international community has a responsibility to end the barbarity that we are witnessing in Gaza, and Ireland, of course, has a role to play. We must insist on the adherence to international law, and we must insist on consequences for those in gross violation of that international law. Israel cannot be treated as a normal state while it engages in such barbarity. The Taoiseach co-signed a letter calling for the suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. That was the correct, albeit belated, thing to do. The failure of the EU to take any meaningful sanction against Israel has undermined Europe's credibility in the world as a voice for peace and conflict resolution. What else are you going to do to force the EU to take action, Taoiseach? And what action are you going to take? Sinn Féin's illegal Israeli settlements divestment bill was read for a second time recently after you had delayed its passage by 9 months. The bill, brought forward by Deputy John Brady, simply ensures that Irish taxpayers' monies cannot be invested in companies that profit from Israel's illegal occupation. Will you now commit to the House to ensuring that this becomes law without delay? And Taoiseach, will you recognise the state of Palestine? No more excuses. Israel is attempting to bomb Palestine out of existence. If the world doesn't take a stand, there will be no Palestine left to recognise. So can I ask you, will you at long last simply do what international law requires of us all and officially acknowledge that the Palestinian people are entitled to their state, to their freedom and to a future free from Israeli occupation, apartheid and oppression? Will you, on our behalf, on behalf of all the people of Ireland, recognise the state of Palestine?
Deputy Carthy,
Caithfidh mé rá gur droscéil ar fad atá le feiscint I Gaza agus tá gach aine sa tuig seo is do creite an méid atá ollingta chum agus caithfidh míad gach aon iireacht a dhéanamh chun an cogadh seo a stoppa agus tá míadna sa tír seo ag déanamh gach iireacht agus tá sé sin sa léir ón méid atá déanta going go dtí seo. Ó heh cuasaí políochta de, ó heh cuasaí airgeadiste, ó heh an cáir agus an tacaíocht atá tugatha going go dtí ionradh agus a lán comhlachtaí eile atá cumasach ó heh cáir agus tacaíocht a thabhairt ó cuasaí bia sláinte I Dacais agus mar sin de. Could I say at the outset that Ireland has comprehensively stood up on this issue and is recognised across the world as having a very distinctive, robust position in relation to the war on Gaza, being one of the first in the European Union to call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, supporting UN resolutions on successive occasions, being one of the first in Europe, again, to lead in respect of supporting Arab Peace Initiative resolutions at the UN. And we've used every political, financial, diplomatic measures that we possibly can, and humanitarian, to help the people of Gaza and help the people of Palestine more generally in terms of the unacceptable and extraordinary situation in terms of the level of hunger, famine and death and destruction that has visited people of Gaza. We are very clear on that. Only the week before last, the Attorney General of this country was before the International Court of Justice in respect of the United Nations, seeking UN General Assembly, seeking an advisory opinion in respect of the legality of Israel's occupation in Palestine. And that was long before the war, Deputy. And I would have overseen and cleared the robust written legal submission that we made to the court last July. And that's followed up by the oral participation of the Attorney General. And I say that because it demonstrates that Ireland takes legal cases seriously. And you kind of use language that's not quite accurate or correct. You said we failed to intervene. We have not failed to intervene in any case. And you know that deep down, but you're just playing politics again, unfortunately, with it and seeking to divide the House and trying to sort of create this wedge issue as if you're more virtuous than anybody else. And I would respectfully suggest to you, you have a role too. You've been too silent in the United States. I've seen no effort of Sinn Féin going to the United States or on your fora or your Twitter platforms and your social media platforms in the United States. No, you've been very vocal on other issues, but on this you've been extraordinarily silent on the Palestinian question in the United States. I've gone to Washington. I've spoken to senators and I've spoken to some of your friends who challenge me about Ireland's position in terms of Israel and Palestine. I actually suggested to one or two they should talk to you in terms of these issues. And I make that serious because you're having a cut at the government all of the time and making sort of inaccurate statements on this, and we shouldn't be doing that. Because the International Court of Justice on the Genocidal Convention, you know our position on that. South Africa itself has not filed a memorial on South Africa on that case yet. Haven't filed it. They will probably, 2 to 3 months, they'll have it ready. We're working on it, and our legal team is working on it. That's the official position. We need hostages released. We need this war to stop. There can be no incursion into Rafah. We have been one of the first out to say stop pausing aid to UNRWA. And we've come up with a 20 million allocation early this year, some weeks ago, to demonstrate our clear focus on relieving the humanitarian crisis that Gazans are facing. Unquestionably, Deputy. There's no one in this House is not appalled or abhorred by what's happening to the people of Gaza. It is wrong, I condemn it, and I've called for it to stop, and to stop now.
Deputy Carthy.
Just to be absolutely clear, Sinn Féin take every opportunity with every individual and state of influence to call for an end to Israeli oppression of the people of Palestine. I asked you a number of questions, you didn't answer a single one of them. I've acknowledged the positive moves on the part of government, including the Attorney General's appearance at the ICJ in respect of the advisory opinion. And if you listen to the words of what the Attorney General said on behalf of the people of Ireland, the next logical question that will be asked by any right-thinking person is, well, what are you going to do about it? One of the questions I asked you is in respect of recognising the state of Palestine. Everybody says there needs to be a two-state solution. Well, currently we have two states, one of whom not only is officially recognised and enjoys a diplomatic relationship, but also enjoys preferential trading, economic, financial arrangements with the Western world. The other state faces annihilation, and we haven't officially recognised it, despite the fact that this House has voted to do so, that the upper House has voted to do so, and that the overwhelming majority of the Irish people want the state of Palestine to be recognised. Your answer is always, we're waiting for somebody else to join us. But I am asking you, Tánaiste, on all of our behalf, show leadership and set a date that Ireland will officially recognise the state of Palestine, and then encourage others to join us in doing so.
Ireland's position is well recognised. If you talk to any Arab nation, they appreciate the Irish position in respect of Palestine. On the question of recognition, it's not about waiting around. It's about deploying that in the most optimal way possible for the people of Palestine. And what do I mean by that? The Arab states currently are very close to concluding a peace initiative, which they're briefing America and the European Union, and which we've been briefed on, which would have a number of dimensions to it. Clearly, an immediate ceasefire, but also a security dimension in respect of the longer-term sustainable security situation in terms of Israel and Gaza and the West Bank, but also then normalisation between Arab states and Israel, and as part of that then a Palestinian administration running Gaza and West Bank together. At that moment, if such an initiative emerges, our view is, correctly, and I think the Arab nations agree with this, that if we then can, with a number of EU member states, move at that particular moment to say, now is the time to recognise, as part of that pathway to political talks, to a political track, to a two-state solution.
Thank you,
and to recognize. There's no issue in Ireland in terms of recognition, but I think it does merit consideration at least, and I would put it to you. Any sensible person watching it would say, let's use it in the most optimal way possible for the benefit of the Palestinian people. And that moment is not too far away.
Deputy Ivana Bacik on behalf of the Labour Party.
Taoiseach, the saga that is RTE should not distract us from the ongoing housing crisis, the housing disaster. Last Friday, homelessness figures set another new and shameful record for your government. We now have 13,531 people homeless, including over 4,000 children, a 17% increase in 1 year. Truly shocking. And this at a time when, as Lorcan Sir writes, there are over 18,000 empty homes available for short-term letting on Airbnb, compared to only 2,000 available for longer-term rental on Daft. And meanwhile, the European Commission sits on legislation that would finally bring in some proper regulation. Taoiseach, it's over 5 years since Labour first proposed legislation to regulate short-term lets. And I raised this question with you last week, but got no satisfactory answer, because there seems to be a view from government that we must just wait. But tell that to the thousands of people in homelessness or looking for a home. Other cities across Europe have already acted, so why can't we? And what are young people to think when they hear average house prices have now exceeded the Celtic Tiger high, and that the average rent in Dublin is over €2,000 per month? What are they to think when they hear over 19,000 eviction notices were issued last year, mostly because the landlord intended to sell? Taoiseach, our rental system is a wild west, truly. And I raised this with you last week as well, but your response to me then amounted to a commentary on what is going on in the rental sector, not a statement of intent from government on what you are doing to address this. The only change you could point to was an extension of the notice period landlords are obliged to give. So in truth, it seems your government has given up on trying to protect renters, and we're seeing unscrupulous landlords like Mark Goddard who can do, it seems, what they like, because the authorities will always be playing catch-up. And the Rental Tenancies Board and indeed local authorities simply do not have the enforcement powers they need to hold people to account. Renters live in fear of eviction, and we saw Michael Byrne in the Examiner recently saying no one renting privately in Ireland now has a secure home. That's the truth, because a notice of termination may come through the doors any day. So we need to see stronger rights and protections for renters. And in Labour, we proposed this 2 years ago in a bill on renters' rights. So is it the government position, however, that you have no further plans to improve the rights of tenants? And Taoiseach, we know increasing supply is clearly at the core of the housing crisis. And for months, I've been asking, when are you going to increase your housing targets? We know they're too low. We know Ireland needs to build more, at least 50,000 homes a year, to meet the chronic situation of undersupply and our growing population. So I'm going to raise this with you every week between now and the local elections. What are you doing to tackle the housing crisis? When are you going to regulate short-term lets? And what are you going to do now to improve the rights of renters and give people the security that they need in their homes?
Thank you, Deputy Bacik. Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, I take issue with some of what you said in terms of my responses last week, Deputy, because I did deal with the protection issue because the government has brought in a raft of legislation and measures to protect tenants. Also the rental tax credit, which has been increased, brought in the budget before last, and increased in this budget. But more fundamentally, the issue is supply in terms of housing. And over 100,000 new homes have been delivered since 2020. And that's taking into account the stoppages during the COVID periods, the 2 lockdowns, which did impact. But of that then, you're looking at about 30,500 social homes added to the social housing stock to Q3 of 2023. And a further, we reckon 10,000 in 2022, 12,000 delivered, social houses delivered in 2023. And again, about 23,000 social homes either on site or at design or tender stage. Now, the importance of social housing is it does relate to homelessness. It does give you greater capacity to deal with the homelessness situation. And we have developed strategies to try and exit people as quickly as possible from homelessness. The Housing First initiative has been a very effective one, which is supporting a person who's experienced homelessness into permanent housing as quickly as possible. You're familiar with that. About 1,300 tenancies covering the period from 2022 to 2026 are provided for and have been delivered in terms of the targets and so on like that. And that's working with the various bodies involved in homelessness. And that we've exceeded the 2-year target of 551 already in respect of that. I think we've exceeded targets last year in terms of housing generally. I think this year we can get close to 35,000 new homes built. We have to incrementally increase it. In respect of the short-term lets, we have, as you've correctly pointed out, we've legislated, we've provided an initiative on that, but we have to, the Commission has to, you know this, you do note that the Commission will have to adjudicate on it. And it sought more time, much to our frustration. But there's no point in going ahead and then being subsequently judged to have infringed and have a bigger mess subsequently. So we are putting pressure on and we are identifying to the Commission the seriousness of this situation in terms of the housing supply issue. And the need to get as much as possible available for the rental market. We do need more people to get into the rental market. We need more people to go in to rent out homes or whatever, as opposed to other options. And that is always a balance on the regulatory side as well. Because there is evidence that a lot of people are leaving the market because they feel there's no certainty in the market for them either, and that's something we have to bear in mind.
Taoiseach, I think we agree on one thing. The issue is supply, but I'm not hearing from you or indeed from any government spokesperson any sense of an urgency about tackling that chronic undersupply. And so young people like the transition year students in the gallery who are very welcome today, who are listening in, young people are getting no sense of hope that this government is going to act to ensure that there will be sufficient supply of homes to meet their needs and the needs of a growing population at a time when we're seeing such chronic undersupply. The reality is your targets are just too low. Your targets for house building, but also your targets on the tenant in situ scheme. And one commentary that Dublin Simon Community Taoiseach made last week, one comment, Taoiseach, that the Dublin Simon community made in response to that shameful figure on homelessness last week was that the tenant in situ targets are also too low. So you have to ensure that targets are raised to meet the real crisis level of need out there, both in building new homes and in supplying greater security to renters in terms of the tenant in situ scheme. So we're asking you again, Taoiseach, what is your government doing now to address the serious instability and insecurity that so many renters are now experiencing and to address those crisis figures of homelessness?
Well, first of all, we need to be honest with people. And people, it's great in politics to say, oh, we have a target of 50,000. I think you said you have a target of 1 million houses in 10 years. With no inkling of a plan to do it. We're the only party, or government, in the House, 3 parties together. That's music to Paul Murphy's here because he believes in the one-party state, as we know. But could I just say that in terms of and this is important. I mean, we know what's in the pipeline for next year. There's a whole the urgency. This is the #1 issue facing the country. Government has acknowledged it's the number one issue. We've built 100,000. We need to raise the level of building. Not to be playing politics. Oh, we have a better target than you. That happened in the last election. Someone was doing 50,000, somebody else is doing 100,000. Oh, we're going to do 150,000. But you've got to get them built and stop objecting all over the place to housing. If it's the priority as is, people need to stop objecting to housing developments as they're going up on the basis of whether they're social, affordable or whatever. And that has happened too, and that has slowed down a lot of projects on councils. But that said, don't be under any illusion, but that there is a total urgency in respect of housing. And there's a whole raft of schemes, as you know, the Help to Buy scheme, the First Home scheme, have had a significant impact in terms of the number of housing that's been completed, and giving young people, and the number of young people who are able to draw down mortgages in the last year or two is at a record level compared to the early 2000s. We are improving it, but we have a lot more to do.
Hey. Deputy Paul Murphy, please.
Thanks a lot, Ken Corla. On Tuesday night, a crowd gathered outside Selbridge Manor. That's where more than 100 people seeking asylum, children, women and men, live. And the crowd chanted, "Paedophiles out. Deport them now. Get them out." There were threats made to burn the building where people live, to burn the building down. Why? Because of a disgusting lie spread on social media by far-right agitators. The lie was that a 7-year-old girl had been raped in the hotel by 3 non-Irish men. First shared by a supporter of the Irish Freedom Party online, and then amplified by far-right agitators Fergus Power and Derek Bly, and people were called to protest. It was a lie. These people do not care about the truth. They're happy to spread lies with the aim of deceiving people and the aim of whipping people up. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Umar Al-Qadri, the chair of the Irish Muslim Council, was lured into a housing estate and beaten up in a racist assault. This is what a rise in the far right is going to look like. More arson attacks, more racist violence, more danger in our communities. The vast majority of people reject this. People know that responsibility for the housing crisis, the health crisis, the deep inequality in our society lies with the government, not with vulnerable people. That majority is represented by those who came out of their homes in Tallaght to help Dr. Al-Qadri when he was attacked, by those who warned residents of Selbridge Manor arriving home from work about what was going on and helped them get back safely. That majority will be on display this Saturday when more than 130 organisations have come together to organise a solidarity march. At 1:30 p.m. at Parnell Square, thousands of people will stand together against racism, hate and war, for homes, health and rights for all, and to demand that the wealth is shared and inequality is ended. We live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but more than 4 in 10 parents have skipped meals so their children could have enough to eat. A country full of vacant and derelict properties, almost 60,000 long-term vacant, but where more than 4,000 children are in emergency accommodation. Properties that should be CPO'd by councils, as has finally now happened in Clondalkin. The far-right agitators are working very consciously to direct people's anger not at those at the top of our society, but against those at the bottom. I have confidence in people coming out on Saturday, making their views known, but I have a lot less confidence in the government. What is the state going to do to protect people? Why did it take so long, more than a day, for Gardaí to issue a statement debunking the dangerous lies being spread by the far right? When they're spreading lies about imaginary crimes, why is there not an immediate response to tell the truth to people?
First of all, I condemn without reservation the behaviour and activities of people at that location last week. And it's not the first time that malicious and false rumours have been spread about people seeking international protection. We've all heard those rumours, and they've been deliberately spread falsely and wrongly, and that stands to be condemned. The Gardaí are investigating aspects of that, I understand, in respect of false rumours, but also in terms of any attack on an individual. The Dr. Al-Qadri, that's shocking, condemned without reservation. And people came to help him, as you say, and I read that, and I think that illustrates that the vast majority of Irish people have no time for violence, for criminal behaviour, essentially. Let's not call it anything else. And that's why I don't feel it's correct or proper to just juxtapose, which you kind of did in your presentation, that with economic issues or political issues or issues around wealth distribution, which are fair enough issues any day in this House, but to kind of juxtapose that to the violence that you've correctly identified and condemned, I don't quite get that. I don't accept the juxtaposition either, because there are legitimate arguments to be had about the enterprise model we have in this country, with strong social protection in the country, with strong social interventions in this country. The state intervenes a lot in Ireland to protect people, either in housing or in health or in social protection. And we've intervened a lot in the last 2 years because of the cost of living increase. But our economic model, I suggest, is a better model than the one that you advocate. And I think people would be in a far worse condition, I respectfully put to you, Deputy, if they were to follow the economic model that you follow, which is anti-private enterprise, and you don't believe in private enterprise, and you don't believe in the whole concept of entrepreneurship and people developing the economy, which in our view has resulted in about 2.7 million people now at work, which is record high levels of employment in Ireland. 3/4 of the working age population now in employment, at an all-time high, unemployment at 4.2%. We added 90,000 jobs alone in the last year. And again, many of those jobs, I just was in the position to announce 100 of them yesterday with Infinius, companies that are high-quality jobs that are being provided. And in the public service, there's been a dramatic, exponential increase in employment across all of the services that the state provides. And we are focused on that from an economic perspective. But it's that balance between an enterprise model that has generated wealth in this country, that has enabled us to redistribute it, and particularly to protect the most vulnerable.
Deputy Murphy.
I don't doubt for a minute, Taoiseach, that you are utterly opposed to and that you condemn the arson attacks, the racist violence, the lies, the misinformation, and so on. I don't doubt that. But I do think the government bears a responsibility. Not the same responsibility, of course, as the far right. But for example, you have placed over 1,000 people who've come here seeking asylum in harm's way by putting them on the streets. That's a policy choice you have made. You created a 2-tier asylum process, which legitimised some of the arguments suggesting that these people aren't legitimate asylum seekers. That's the one level in which you're responsible. The second is for the real issues that affect people. The housing crisis, which gets worse day on day, the inequality, the health crisis. Your government is responsible because of the economic system and those that you represent, the corporate landlords, the private developers, and so on. None of that, of course, justifies any racist violence. None of that is the fault of asylum seekers. But it is true that the far right try to tap into real legitimate issues and then direct anger away from your government, away from those at the top of our society and towards those at the bottom. And that's precisely why on Saturday we are marching to demand homes for all.
All right, thank you.
To demand health care for all, to demand a tackling of inequality as well as rejecting the racism and hatred spread by the far right.
I think that's shocking stuff. Like you condemn it, you condemn racism, you condemn appalling behaviour, but it's the government's fault, really. That's what you're saying, Deputy. You want thousands to say it's the government's fault. You are now exploiting reprehensible behaviour as a tool and a political tool to leverage that against the government parties. That's what you do with every issue, by the way. That is your modus operandi on every single issue that comes before society. That is how you operate, Deputy. I think it's reprehensible behaviour. The bottom line is this. Racists and people of the far right, they will look for any excuse to justify unacceptable behaviour. This is in my view, we need to be categoric, unequivocal, not mix it up or try and mix the messages. You just, no. What I'm saying is, let's not mix up messages here. There's only one message here. We condemn what you do. We condemn the racists. We condemn the undermining of human beings, the undermining of the dignity of every individual who comes into this country. And let's not try and queer the picture better or try and muddy the waters here, which you have tried to do. And what I would say to you is this, Deputy. Everybody knows we've had unprecedented situation with the war in Ukraine that Russia visited upon Europe. First time since World War II that you've used that I disagree with, but Russia has done that. 100,000 people in, five-fold increase in people seeking asylum because of war and conflict all over the world. It's a huge pressure point all over Europe. It's not a policy choice, Deputy. Not a policy choice at all, as you've just got to throw out there.
Please,
it's not. It's a genuine attempt by a government to respond to unprecedented situation that we are facing in terms of the migratory situation across the globe.
Deputy Marian Harkin on behalf of the Independent Group of Deputies, please.
When I spoke on the family referendum in the Dáil a few weeks ago, I agreed we do need to widen the definition of family in the Constitution to include, for example, one-parent families, non-married families, grandmothers, grandchildren, etc. And I, like many others speaking in the Dáil that day, mostly women, I might add, while supporting the aspirations of the amendment, had considerable difficulty in the term durable relationships. Now, relationships are complex and unique. One person's idea of a durable relationship might be, well, let's live together for a year or two, see how it works out. Durable relationships are hugely influenced by a person's expectations, by their hopes and beliefs, and by their dreams. It emanates as much from the heart and the gut as it does from the head. As one reporter in a daily newspaper said, I have been in a number of durable relationships. Only 2 of them ended in marriage. Did I love the people in those relationships? Sure. For the years of commitment, would I attest to it in court? Yes. Yes, I would at the time. Now, no. And therein lies the difficulty, Taoiseach. When durable relationships end, what happens to the rights of those adults and children in that family? And if there are several durable relationships, how are rights adjudicated? So now that the state is stepping in and without any legal framework is according the status of family to all durable relationships, which is fine. But I believe the very least we owe ordinary men, women and especially children is some kind of legal framework in which they have some protection that they can rely on for their rights and protections as a family. So, for example, how can a person go to Revenue and say, I'm in a durable relationship in a family and I want the same tax treatment as other families? If the Revenue object, will they have to go to court or will the Revenue just say, yeah, that's fine? How can a person have clarity about succession rights, about claims to property ownership, if the status of their family, based on a durable relationship, and this is crucial, can only be decided retrospectively by the courts where there is a dispute? And these are real everyday issues that people are bringing up with me, and I have no answers other than you may have to go to court. And I wait your answers. My final question is, why didn't you trust this House to give some legal framework or guidelines to those who wish to assert their family status by means of a durable relationship?
Thank you, Deputy, for raising the issue and raising the question. Could I say at the outset, we have a constitutional framework and we have a legal framework, which this Oireachtas have provided through a variety of laws, and I'll deal with that in a second. But on the constitutional front, durable relationships, as you quite correctly said at the outset of your contribution, is about including couples with or without children, single parents and their children, grandparents raising their children. 42% of Irish children in 2022 were born to an unmarried couple. And therefore, it's important that the Constitution reflects that reality. And I think people are broadly supportive of that. But what is equally important, and you asked, where is the protection? And the existing text of the Constitution provides guidance in determining whether a given relationship can be considered a family under the Constitution. Because the family is described as the natural, primary and fundamental unit group of society, quote from the Constitution, and a moral institution possessing inalienable and imprescriptible rights. Article 41(2) goes on to observe that the family is the necessary basis of social order and indispensable to the welfare of the nation and the state. And that text remains unchanged under the proposed amendment. And that ensures that the constitutional protection and recognition afforded to the family, that will be afforded, is not extended to casual or transient relationships. But on the body of law that exists, there's a huge body of law on welfare, on taxation, on family unification that already exists. And rights and benefits are usually created by legislation. So the Oireachtas has that, and the executive of the day has that function. So persons' taxation obligations are set out in the Taxes Consolidation Act of 1997 and related legislation. A person's entitlement to social welfare is largely set out in the Social Welfare Consolidation Act of 2005. Family reunification rights are set out in the International Protection Act of 2015. And you referenced the Succession Act. That was probably one of the great radical moves of the 20th century. 1965, as Charles J. Haughey introduced that at the time. It was described by international legal people as the end of feudalism in Ireland, where it gave women the right to succession. And that act is still there and, of course, sustains. So the family amendment doesn't repeal, the proposed family amendment that we're bringing in, it does not seek to repeal, alter, or amend the rights or obligations of persons that exist under these statutes. It's very important that we don't try and confuse it. And that's very clear, by the way. It doesn't seek to do any of that. And equally, the legislature will continue to retain its entitlement. So you ask, why don't we leave it out? The Oireachtas every year is entitled to set rational social welfare, taxation and immigration policies in pursuit of the common good. We retain that right within this House and so forth.
Deputy Harkin.
Thank you, Taoiseach. My concern is that legal ambiguity around durable relationships, which are or will be families if the referendum is passed, only arises where there's disputes between the members of that family, between revenue and that family. And given that we have no legal framework, the only way to resolve those disputes seems to me to go to the court, and maybe one court after another, right up to the Supreme Court. You mentioned a lot of legislation. I can only comment on one. You talked about the Family Reunification Act 2015. The most recent case on that is the 2020 case in the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court said that we're talking about the durability of a relationship. They said, and I quote, "A durable relationship will tend to be one of some duration, but that is not to say that the durability of the relationship is in itself a defining feature." It says it is perfectly possible for a committed long-term, what is often called a serious relationship, to exist between two persons who have known one and another for a short time. Now, that conflicts what you spoke about a minute ago about transient relationships. And the outcome of this case was they said that the minister could not make a 2-year cohabitation requirement mandatory for family reunification, that the minister has flexibility. And that's the problem, Taoiseach. It's unclear, it's uncertain, and families really do deserve better.
I think it's very clear. I just spelt it out in terms of the taxation question. There is legislation that governs taxation. We have the Civil Partnership and Cohabitation Act, which we passed in this House. all of these issues have been set out in clear, but the legal frameworks are there. Social Welfare Act of 2005, the Taxes Consolidation Act of 1997, the Family Reunification, the International Protection Act of 2005, which deals with family protection rights. So I think there's been attempts, I'm not saying you're involved in this, to try and muddy the water and create confusion. But there's a constitutional framework there, and there's two great strengths of our constitution. One is the power to amend that the people have, which we're now exercising. The second is judicial interpretation. Judicial interpretation has been there since the beginning of the constitution, which made it a radical constitution in the 1930s in the context of fascism and everything, that the executive of the day actually ceded some of its rights, and the Oireachtas did, to the courts. We did that back in 1937. It's quite a radical thing to do when states were taking power in. So my point is, there are two frameworks here. You have your constitutional framework, it's a written constitution, which will always be subject to judicial interpretation. But you have the legal framework, which the Oireachtas passes, in terms of success, in terms of taxation and social protection. Apologies, I'm engaged.
Oh, you're in full flight. Yes.
Sorry.
Well, I would appeal to people, please, just to adhere to the time that is allowed and laid down. That concludes Leaders' Questions. Thanks to everyone for their participation.